Metal Gear Solid 3 is one of those games. We all know the ones. The ones that are considered untouchable, the peak of what the video game medium is capable of. This always worries me. I've played many of these kinds of games and most of them end up not agreeing with the consensus. I still think they're good games most of the time, but not the peak of what we can achieve with the medium by any stretch. So on one hand, I was really worried when I started up MGS3, but on the other, I was quite excited since I'd enjoyed MGS2 and I couldn't wait to find out if I enjoyed this one as well. And from the title of this video, you can probably tell that I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a massive improvement over MGS2 in almost every way. Our story begins all the way in Japan at the offices of Konami with a man named Hideo Kojima. He had just wrapped up work on his second entry in his stealth action series and had been informed that Konami wanted a third game. He originally didn't want to make it until the PS3 came out, so that each game would mark a step up in hardware, similar to Valve with the Half-Life series. But when he was informed that the PS3 was several years away, he decided to just make it for the PS2. He also didn't intend to direct this game, instead handing the reins over to younger members of the team, with him acting in a sort of producer-ish role. But he had so many ideas for the game and the setting that he went on to direct anyway when his team said they couldn't implement it all without him. At this point, the team were very experienced with the series and knew their tech very well, but for this entry they would need to completely revamp their game engine. Up to this point, the games had been based in geometric spaces viewed from a top-down perspective that simply wouldn't be enough to bring the lush jungle environments the team had in mind to life. The new engine allowed for much bigger, much more open spaces, but also included the ability to make MGS2 style rooms when they were necessary. For me at least, this change was crucial for making this game a success, because if we just did another game like MGS2, people would have accused Kojima of being out of ideas, which he certainly wasn't. The other change I think was crucial was the changes made to the plot. Metal Gear Solid 2 had a plot that was buried in layers of hidden meanings, characters speaking in riddles, twists and turns, and a back half that becomes fairly incomprehensible if you don't understand all the symbolism and meaning. The story in MGS3 goes for a less plot-driven approach and a more character-driven one, which I prefer as it allows for more connection to be formed between myself and the character I'm playing as a lot easier. This is the most human version of Snake we've played as. Solid Snake always feels like he's just a little too on top of things, kind of a Superman problem, where he's a little too perfect and thus becomes a boring character. This is why people gravitate towards characters like Batman, because while he has a superhuman level intellect and an uncanny ability to piece together evidence at a crime scene, he has failings, often social or ethical, pushing those closest to him far beyond their limits and often bordering on cruelty. Coming back to Naked Snake, he is an exemplary soldier. He's skilled in CQC, stealth master unless I'm holding the controller, and loyal to a fault. His unshaking allegiance to his country and his mission is his character arc. During the prologue, the boss says that Snake does not have an emotion that he carries into battle. Snake might as well be anyone. There's nothing that separates him from those he fights alongside, and across the game he finds things that make him question why he's fighting or what he's fighting for. This culminates in his final confrontation with the boss, where after all that self-discovery and change, he has to kill someone he cared about deeply. By the time he returns, he no longer holds that unwavering loyalty to his country, and after this will soon defect from the United States to form his own private military company with no allegiance to any country. The boss isn't the only important character Snake interacts with. He also has a very interesting relationship with Ocelot. In the last few games, Ocelot has been an antagonistic force, and while he still is here, it feels a bit more juvenile than it did before. In MGS2, Ocelot is one of the masterminds that has been orchestrating the whole game's events, but here, Ocelot is certainly a threat in his personality, but his lack of experience is what lets him down a lot of the time. Snake forms an almost mentorly rivalry with Ocelot, constantly managing to overpower him, but always informing him of why and how he did it, causing each Ocelot encounter to feel different than the last as he evolves his skills to truly become a match for Snake. This is an important relationship for Snake as it teaches him that despite being on opposite sides of a conflict, they don't have to hate one another. They can laugh and learn from each other rather than being constantly adversarial. Eva for me didn't have as much of an impact and more serves as an emotional gut punch at the end rather than a constant force that changes Snake. Main thing she does is give him someone to relay his character growth to, someone to talk to about how his feelings of what his mission is are changing throughout. She's not necessarily a catalyst for any particular change herself. It gives someone for Snake to contrast against, someone who is already fully formed and either unable or unwilling to change further, as shown by how, despite having some feelings for Snake, she still betrays him for the mission. All of this nuance and complexity in character is surprising when you look at how basic the actual plot itself is. The plot takes place in 1964, at the height of the Cold War, as Snake infiltrates Russia to rescue a scientist named Sokolov from a splinter group of the Communist Party led by Colonel Volgin. This mission is dismantled, however, when his mentor the Boss and her Cobra unit defect to the Soviets, bringing with them a nuclear bomb that Volgin uses to shift the communist sites to the States rather than his forces. Snake is sent back into Russia with multiple objectives: find Sokolov and return him to the States, defeat Volgin and retrieve the Philosopher's Legacy, and kill the Boss. As he does this, he encounters the different soldiers who make up the Cobra unit, each of which is defined by the emotion they carry into battle. He works with a spy named Eva who gives him information about Volgin's operations. Part of these operations is Sokolov's recent invention called the Shagohod being built, which Snake and Eva eventually destroy before Snake kills the Boss and the two make their escape back to America. Snake is awarded for his efforts by being given the title of Big Boss, and the final shot is Snake saluting at the Boss's grave. With the plot being so basic, it really does allow the characters to flourish and allow me to form a deeper sense of connection with them rather than just watching them go through the plot. Occasionally in MGS2, it felt like I was just moving from one plot point to the next without a good emotional reason as to why these things had to be done, which is where this entry takes a step in the right direction. Another step the game takes is that cutscenes and codec calls are far more spread out than they were in the last game. There isn't a constant stopping and starting of momentum as you play for 10 minutes, then get bombarded with 30 minutes of talking. This gets a little tedious when you play, not as much in your first playthrough when you're fully invested in the story and you don't know what's going to happen, but when you go back and replay the game and you want to maximise the time spent playing, the constant interruptions and the amount of time they last is a little ridiculous. Luckily in MGS3, the time between gets longer the further you get into the game. This means that you actually get to spend more time sneaking around and less time with the controller out of your hands. Not that you'd want to put the controller down during cutscenes anyway, because many of them have an interactive element with a view from Snake's POV if you hold the R1 button when prompted. I find this difference made me enjoy the experience of MGS3 more than 2 because I felt like I was actually playing a game and not watching a movie. The side effect of this lack of codec calls is that your support team barely gets any characterization. Can you tell me anything substantial about the Major or SIGINT or Paramedic? I know Paramedic likes movies because she tells me about them every time I want to save, but other than that, I cannot tell you a single thing about any of them. And that is a shame, as character is this game's greatest strength over its predecessor. While watching the cutscenes and playing the game, I noticed something that seems to have come up in recent online discussion concerning the remake that's in the works, and that was the colour grade. Colour grading, for those not aware, is typically a filmmaking term used for giving a film or scene a particular look by adjusting things like saturation and contrast and making certain colours appear more prominent than others. The whole game has a greeny-yellow grade to it, which the remake has decided to omit, which people aren't happy about. I can see why. It removes the unique look and artistic vision the game has and makes it look like everything else in the pursuit of the AAA vibe, where we need to push graphical fidelity to its limits, often at the detriment to gameplay. I like that MGS3 has this colour grade. It makes the game stand out even when looking at shots that don't feature anything super identifiable as Metal Gear, you know it's MGS3. Plus it contributes to the atmosphere. The jungle is where you'll spend the majority of your time, and having that greeny hue to everything makes that environment stand out from the cold colours of the last game. Even when you enter the facilities, it keeps the same grade, meaning that it always has a more natural feel to it. The materials of the buildings are all made from concrete and very raw materials when compared to the armoured up giant robots in the future. The other thing contributing to the atmosphere is the soundtrack. It very clearly takes inspiration from the James Bond films, even having a song over a title sequence that matches the name of the game. Aside from that piece though, a lot of the tracks have a sort of quiet tension to them. They're not out and out bombastic with blaring horns, but they do feature drums quite heavily as a key part of the instrumentation with a fast pace to them. You're meant to notice the drums, and they're meant to inform your heartbeat in this moment subliminally. Aside from that, you have a lot of hushed tones and bare bones melodies which enhance that the main thing you hear is the drum, along with letting the game audio speak for itself and letting you get sucked into the environment and the sound design. When you're sneaking around, there's not actually any music. You hear the rain pelting down, you hear Snake's footsteps, the flora moving around as you push through it, the animals far off in the distance, and while you play, it's not uncommon to fully immerse yourself and truly feel like you're inhabiting the space. Everything I've spoken about so far has been about presentation, music, plot, and the one part of the game that I haven't spoken about is the gameplay itself. I've hinted at it, but I've not actually covered any of the game, and that's because I wanted to leave it for last, because it's the part of the game that I have the most to say about, because in some areas it's amazing and a big step up, and in other parts it kinda shits the bed and doesn't hold up great. There's a lot of mechanics that have been added into MGS3 that make it a substantially more engaging stealth game than MGS2. MGS2 only had a few things you could do: prone, try and core, just avoid line of sight of guards. But in MGS3, the environment and the mechanics enforce a much slower, yet more tense pace overall. The movement options the game presents are mostly the same as in MGS2, but unlike MGS2, I didn't spend most of my time here running around quickly taking out guards with my tranq gun, but instead I spent it crawling along the floor or through some bushes, slowly taking my time to aim my tranq gun at the enemies and take them out in a very specific order to get where I want to go. This is the optimal way to get around, as if you do what you used to do and run around, you are 100 times more likely to get spotted and die before you even finish the tutorial area. What helps keep this pace interesting are the multiple survival systems that were added in to encourage the player to not just see the environment as a backdrop for stealth, but to really engage with it. Camouflage is indicated by a percentage in the top corner that tells you how visible you are to the enemy soldiers around you. The higher this percentage, the more invisible you become. Snake can change clothes and face paint in order to blend in better with any environment he finds himself in, and new camos can even be found by exploring or for specific story segments. There's a portion where you have to sneak into the facility of Grozny Grad dressed as a high-ranking member of Volgan's inner circle to gain access to the cell that holds Sokolov. This character, Rykov, was actually a play on and looks exactly like Raiden from the last game, basically allowing people who didn't like him to gain a sense of revenge while playing as not necessarily Solid Snake, but a Snake. I think this system is interesting and it adds a new dimension to stealth, but it does get really repetitive to go in and out of the menu every time you enter a slightly different textured area. Add to this that you need to enter 2 menus because of having to change your outfit and face paint, and I think you get the point. The menu I used the least was the food menu. There's a bar underneath your health that represents your stamina. Stamina has a few effects if it gets too low. Your aim will get shaky and your stomach will rumble, alerting guards to your location. Neither of these are optimal outcomes, so you have to find food or capture the different animals that can be found as you traverse through the jungle. A small detail I find fascinating is that depending on how much Snake likes the taste of the animal he eats, the more stamina he will gain back from eating it. This means that you can prioritize capturing certain animals to maximize the stamina gained from your limited storage. There's one last puzzle piece to these compelling systems, and that is the cure menu. The cure menu is where you will spend a good portion of your time playing, as whenever you take any significant damage, you'll need to fix it here. The 2 different things you use are medicine and surgical tools. You'll extract bullets, fix broken bones, sew cuts, take meds, all to heal yourself. This is a far expanded system than what was seen before, where previously you would just use a ration. Here you need to use all the correct tools and procedures to adequately heal from your injuries. The main problem comes from having to break this out halfway through an intense battle sequence, completely taking me out of the tension of the fight. I think there should have been some way to have this system during stealth and exploration, but some alternate method used for boss fights so that healing is something that incurs a risk of some kind. Like in Elden Ring, some of the bosses move so quick that taking the time to heal from their barrage of blows can lead to taking more damage than had you not bothered in the first place. On boss fights, I'm not a fan of most of them here. Metal Gear always seems to struggle with boss fights as it's not what the games are built around. The controls often feel clunky, or the faster pace of the fight doesn't mesh with the slower pace of everything else. Ocelot, Vulcan, the Pain, the Fear, and the Fury are just okay fights. They're either boring mechanically in the case of the Pain or the Fear, where you don't really need to do much to beat them, or they're frustrating because they move too quick for the game's slower mechanics to keep up with, like with Ocelot and the Fury. The Shagohad is the fight I downright despise as it combines both of these problems together, leaving the fight as frustrating and boring and the absolute lowest point in the whole game. That leaves one left out, Vulcan. What's wrong with his fight? Well, it's interesting mechanically, forcing the player to use CQC, and it's not particularly frustrating as Vulcan moves at a pace that matches these mechanics. There's no emotional payoff though. I have no emotional investment in Vulcan as he is simply an antagonistic force to drive the plot forward and not anyone particularly important to Snake. You could replace him with nearly any bad guy from any game or movie, and the plot wouldn't dramatically change. I totally forgot to mention the CQC because I didn't really use it much aside from in the two bosses that required it. It allows the player to get much closer and more personal with their targets and take them out in a variety of hand-to-hand throws and holds. It clearly had a lot of effort put into it as it features very prominently on the main menu, in which you can see these animations play out forwards, backwards, at high and low speed, and in a variety of colours. So for those of you paying attention, that leaves 3 fights left: the Sorrow, the End, and the Boss. These 3 are the pinnacle of what more fights should be like in the MGS series. Let's start with the Sorrow. It's a total subversion. In fact, you don't lay a finger on him because he's already dead. Instead, what happens is that he presents you with every enemy and boss you've killed up to this point in the game to make you question if it was really necessary, or was it just violence for the sake of violence? Depending on how you play Snake, this encounter gets harder or easier, and I love this. It's taking what would otherwise be a climactic moment in any other game, and uses it as one for self-reflection. The End is a great example of a boss suited for the slower pace of MGS stealth. The End is a legendary World War II sniper who has mastered the art form with patience. He can sit for hours at a time, focused down the lens of his sight, waiting for just the right moment to strike. As Snake, you need to sneak around to make sure you're not shot, while also spotting the old man and sniping him first before he moves to a new position. You do this in the middle of the jungle, so there is a lot of cover and distractions around to muddy the arena and make spotting your target a challenge and giving you places to hide. It also has an alternate method of beating it where you save the game and come back to it a week later and the End will have died of old age. The fact that they even thought to put this in baffles me because it's such a specific scenario, but I love that it's here. The boss is the polar opposite to the Vulcan fight we spoke about earlier. The boss is a bit frustrating, and to this day I'm still not certain as to how you beat this fight without taking damage yourself, and it does get a bit repetitive after a while. But what it does have is the emotional payoff of a whole game's worth of build-up. The boss has been set up since the beginning as the peak soldier and someone who is incredibly important to Snake. The fight comes with the tension of trying to beat someone of superior skill, the emotional conclusion of Snake's character arc of finding an emotion to carry into battle, and the final objective for Snake to be able to complete his mission. This proves that a fight does not need to be mechanically competent in order to be good and to have weight. It just has to be presented the right way, which makes it such a shame that most of the boss fights completely fail at this. Speaking of frustrating, this game features an escort segment. I've given a couple of games flack for including escort segments, and I'm gonna have to do the same thing here. Eva moves so slowly and doesn't blend into the environment at all, which got me spotted very quickly, and this whole section of what is meant to be tense slow sneaking with an injured companion turned into a shooting gallery more akin to a Call of Duty campaign. This didn't connect me to Eva or make me want to protect her. It did the exact opposite. I started to see her as the mechanic she represents instead of a character. The one saving grace is that I could at least see where the enemies were coming from ahead of time thanks to the difference in perspective. This game decided to drop the top-down camera that the series had since the original Metal Gear on the NES in favour of a pulled-back over-the-shoulder camera that allows me to see a lot more on the horizontal axis, which helps to eliminate frustration in many ways. There's no radar in this game, which has the impact of not being able to see enemy sightlines, so had it stuck with the top-down view, there would have been absolutely no way to tell where enemies were, and being spotted would have felt cheap and unfair. The game does still keep the first-person camera as an option, which comes in handy when aiming weapons and also includes a really cool detail. There's a scene in the game where Snake is captured after being caught sneaking into Vogan's facility Groznygrad. He is tortured for information, but as per his training he doesn't break, and in fact isn't even after what Vogan believes he's after. Throughout the game, Vogan has been skeptical as to whether or not the boss is truly committed to her defection from the United States. In this scene, he tests her to truly harm Snake in a way that cannot be fixed with a splint and some time in a hospital bed. He challenges her to remove his eye, but fortunately for us, Ocelot interrupts with his usual gunplay shenanigans. He turns his attention to Eva and plays a game of Russian roulette, where he juggles 3 revolvers and only one of them has a bullet loaded into it. Snake attempts to stop him in doing this, but in doing this, Ocelot shoots out Snake's eye, which, might I say, is super impressive given that he did this while being shoved and yet aims it perfectly. The result of this is that Snake wears an eye patch for the rest of the game, and this has become an iconic design of Big Boss in the Metal Gear franchise. I tell you all of this because 1, it's a really cool scene and character design choice, and 2, because if you go into first person before this moment, it looks as you would expect. But after this scene, if you go into first person, the right side of his vision is noticeably hindered because of his now missing eye. It's a fantastic detail that barely anyone would notice, but it helps to keep the world consistent. And with that, we come to the end of this video. Now, there is so much more that I could talk about with this game. It is packed with small details and bits of trivia that I could mention, but no matter how much I say, I will always be leaving something out. So I'm going to wrap this up, as I've covered everything that I deem crucial to explaining why I think this is a perfect stealth game. Its mechanics really drive home the idea that this is not just a gauntlet of sneaking challenges, but instead a real environment to survive and get lost in, and to appreciate everything about it, you need to let yourself fall into it. To be immersed in the atmosphere and the tension of sneaking through these facilities, you need to be open to that experience, and if you are, you're in for one hell of an espionage thriller that excels in telling a compelling, character-driven story that, while it falls in some areas, I cannot recommend enough. Hello everybody, welcome to the end of video ramble. Today I've got a fair bit to talk about with the Metal Gear Solid 3 video, because oh my god, this one took some fucking work. So this video had to be entirely rewritten because I had a total breakdown about the fact that the last couple of videos from this format, like the Crash Bandicoot and the Metal Gear Solid 2 one, they were all starting to feel very samey, and I was really starting to fucking hate them. They were starting to feel like a factory process, and that they were just coming out because like they were easy to make and it was a format to stick to, and I fucking hated it. So what I did is I completely rewrote the script in a different style that I felt like it had a little bit more feeling in it, rather than like me just spouting off facts about what the game does. I think I included a little bit more this time about like why I like certain things, and stuff like that. The last couple of videos, Games Lost to Time and How Sifu Feels Like an Action Movie, those were both responses to this same problem, which is why those were shorter, but also entirely different to my usual style. Basically, I just had a total fucking writer's collapse, essentially, and was starting to hate making these videos, and they weren't fun to edit because they were just the same thing every fucking time, and they were all coming out the same. Whereas I feel like this one, I tried out a few new things. I did some stuff that was a bit different, things that meshed a bit more with the game in terms of style and presentation. Like the colour grade of the whole video, for example, has the kind of greeny yellow to it that I talked about that MGS3 has. I filmed in a new location. It filmed like in a different position to usual. It's just basically the whole thing was just different, and it's really like reignited the drive to make these videos again. And hopefully the next one comes out soon. I'm not sure what it's going to be, but we'll find out. I do have a couple ideas, but MGS4 is not going to be next. I'm going to do another game in between, at the very least, and probably, depending on when this comes out and stuff like that, I'll either have played or will play MGS4 on stream, so that I can refresh myself on it, because it's now been months since I played it, just so that I can really, dive into the script. But yeah, I'll let you all go now, and enjoy the rest of your day. So, bye!